Hey everybody, welcome back. So today I want to talk about what I would assume is most children's first advancement in travel, if you want to call it that. As humans, we're constantly advancing the modes of travel that we have, and it makes our world seem much more smaller. And as a kid, that first advancement of travel, I would assume for most of us, is a bicycle. And I don't remember when I got my bike. It wasn't even talked about. Like, my mom loaded up my brother and I in the car. We drove to a garage sale. Had no idea why we were going there. And mom's just like, "Yeah, I'm getting you a bike." Okay. It was news to me. And I don't remember how old I was. I'd have to guess I was probably first grade. Yeah, I was probably kindergarten, maybe first grade. Anyways, we go to the garage sale, we get this bike, and it is a Schwinn Scrambler, which I believe is one of the first like BMX style bikes that Schwinn created. I believe in the late 70s. I'm not really a bike guru guy. I did a little bit of research for this, and now I'm having issues recalling the research. But that's what my bike was. Although they had customized it, they painted the whole frame black. And the only way I knew it was a scrambler was you could see on like the down tube, if you ran your fingers across it, you could feel, I don't know if it's vinyl or what, but the sticker that said, Schwinn Scrambler on it. If you run your fingers across it, you could feel it under there. And I looked one day because I had like a pad on the down tube, and I took it off and I felt it and I'm like, what is this? And so I look at it and I'm like, oh, Schwinn Scrambler, that's what my bike is. Because it was devoid really of all other branding elements to it. So the frame was all painted black. They took these red, like a 5-spoke, 5-star wheel off of a Schwinn Predator and put those wheels on my bike. And then it had red grips. I think it either had a red or a black plastic seat. I don't even know if that was stock. It was a hard plastic seat with holes in it. And then my parents had bought me some like padding to put on, like, I don't know, the down tube and the bar that goes in between the handlebars, and the handlebars will come up and the tube that goes in between there. And that was my bike. So I can remember my mom trying to teach me how to ride this thing in the front yard, so I could fall over in the grass and not get hurt too much. And I didn't really take to this thing that quick at all. I fell down a lot. I got pretty discouraged. Eventually, training wheels got put on my bike, and I loved it. Like, I'd go out and I'd ride up and down the street. I remember one time I just rode up and down our street, and I ended up riding up and down it for an hour, and it felt like 5 minutes. I don't know, I had so much fun riding that thing. And I can remember my cousins. My cousins were younger than me, and I can remember them coming over to our house and they could ride their bikes. And I can remember them, I think they asked their mom, why can't Jason ride his bike yet? And she was like, well, all kids learn how to do things, at a different speed and whatnot. And I remember being kind of discouraged about that, but it also didn't give me the energy to like, oh man, I really need to put forth effort and learn how to ride this bike. So the bike mainly sat around in the garage. And when my mom got remarried to my stepdad, Steve, he saw the bike in the garage and said, why aren't you riding this bike? And I'm like, I don't know how to ride it. And he's like, really? Because at this time I think I would have been in third grade, like just starting third grade. And I don't know if it must have been a Friday night. We were in the backyard. It was a really beautiful afternoon out, and we were sitting on the the swing set, swinging. And Steve mentioned my bike, and so he got out of the garage, he pulled the training wheels off of it, and he's like, well, why don't you just see if you can ride it? And I mean, I haven't jumped on this thing. I don't know, it felt like forever. Of course, that's kid years, so it was probably a year, maybe, a year and a half. I don't know, it felt like a decade. I jump on this thing and I can ride it. And so I'm riding it around the backyard. I'm going circles around the swing set. And like my mind's blown. I was like, oh my God, I can actually ride this bike. And I didn't put forth any effort into learning how to ride it. So I don't know. We spent the rest of our afternoon or whatever, outside. And the next morning I was so excited. I got up and like daylight was just starting to occur. The sun had not come over the horizon yet. And I went out into the garage and I got on my bike and I took it out into the street. And I rode it around for just a few minutes because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't a fluke, that I could still do it. And I could. So there was nobody out in the streets. No one was out at all. So it must have been a weekend. But anyways, I can still ride this thing. So I am super stoked and I love it. I would ride that thing all over the place. Like I was talking about in advancements of travel, like I didn't stray too far from my house when I walked. And if I went to friends' houses, my mom always drove me. They were close enough that I could have walked, but she always drove me. And maybe that was also because of my age. I'm a kid in first or second grade. So I don't know, but now I get this bike and I can cover much more ground, much faster and easier. So I started riding around my whole neighborhood, went around streets that I'd never been on. And you just expand your knowledge of your area because now it's an easier form of travel. And what also changed was that when I went over to friends' houses, mainly Chris's house, because I'm like a one friend guy and Chris is my best friend. Mom never took me over there. Before the bike, Mom always took me to Chris's house. After I learned how to ride that bike, I was always riding over there myself. So that changed. So it also gave me like a little bit of independence and a little bit of freedom. Kind of that, what was really that early first taste of getting in a vehicle and just kind of deciding, where do I want to go? Now granted, I couldn't go that far because I was on a bike, but it's the same feeling that when you first get your car and you start it up and it's like, all right, where do I want to go? I just want to go for a drive. Where do I want to go? And it just opens your horizons to your environment and your world. And I absolutely adored riding that thing. And I actually didn't get to ride it for very long, which we'll talk about later. Some changes happened with my life, and we ended up moving. And where we moved to, it really wasn't conducive to riding a bicycle. So I really only rode a bike for about, I don't know, 2.5 years of my childhood. So BMX was really big back in the 80s. Everybody wanted a BMX bike. And some of my classmates had like really nice, like actual BMX bikes, like racing bikes where they didn't have a kickstand on them. And I was kind of jealous. I'm like, oh man, my bike has a kickstand. Well, that sucks. So I wanted to remove it. And my stepdad wouldn't let me remove it. So I took an old shoelace. And I like tied it up. And I was like, okay, my bike doesn't have a kickstand anymore. It's automatically cooler. My friend Chris, he had a BMX. He had a Schwinn Predator, and this bike was awesome. I really liked his bike. It had a moly chrome frame, and then it had blue accents. Even the tires were blue. The tires, the grips, I think the seat, and then it had the padding on the tubes. And it said I think it said Predator on them. I mean, this bike was awesome. And I was jealous of that thing. I just thought that bike looked so cool. And that's what he had. But, and that was the thing. Like, I'd go over to Chris's house, and then we would just end up going for bike rides. And he lived in a more northern part of town. This town's not very big. But he lived more north in town than I did. And so going to his house, then I got to see these neighborhoods from, we went to the edge of town. You had city block after city block after city block, and then all of a sudden the last block of town, that was it. It was like open pastures and cornfields. That is not the case now because, you know, that was like 30 years ago. It's all been developed. But it was the edge of town, and we would ride all the way to that edge of town, and we would go out over, and all those edges of town are no longer edges of town anymore. But so I got to expand my horizons even more of the town just by riding to his house, and then basically riding to the places that he had already gone to on his bike. So I pretty much knew, you know, this, well, as a kid, I guess, this fairly large section of the town, which also kind of surrounded our elementary school. We tended to stay off the real busy streets. I mean, you would eventually get busy streets that were intermixed in between the residential streets, you know, like the main thoroughfares that people take to get to their residential neighborhoods. We usually wouldn't ride on those. We would cross over them, but we would stick to residential streets and ride around town. But so much fun. I loved feeling the wind against my face. You know, Top Gun was really big back then, so I would pretend that I was Maverick flying a F-14 Tomcat, and I would get down by the handlebar and I'd stick my eyes right over that bar that was right there, and I'd start making like jet engine noises and stuff, and I'd lean over and pretend that I was flying a Tomcat. A, a lot of good memories. My dad liked to camp and go fishing. And we would go camping numerous times during the summer. Like we'd always go Labor Day weekend. You know, that's the last big like weekend, summer weekend in the United States. So we always went camping Labor Day weekend. And our bikes always went with us. And so my brother and my stepsister, we all brought our bikes. And sometimes we would go to these really cool campsites that would have like nice paved, cement paved walking trails out in the woods. And we would be blazing down those things. Like, thank God we never met another person, because we would go as fast as we could possibly go. And if there was a little bit of a grade going downhill, I can remember us just flying through those trails. Like, if we would have crashed and wiped out, if we didn't break a bone, holy cow, would we have road rash. I mean, we would just fly through those things. And a lot of fun, you know. You don't have a whole lot to do during the day during your camping, so it's like, hey, jump on the bike. You know, you go on the campground, you find a trail, you hit the trail, you go out and explore all that, and you come back, and boy, those are the days. I'm not really an outdoorsy person now, but fond memories of riding the trails and then at night sitting by the campfire. And I don't know what it is about staring into a fire, but it's like you can just zone out. Like you just look at the flames. And I would just like zone out until a bat or something would like fly overhead, you know, and it would break my attention. But I don't know, you just get so relaxed, and those were good times. Those were really good times. So let's see. So I learned how to ride that bike was in the summer. I can remember one time we decided to ride our bikes to my elementary school. And at that point, I don't know how old we were. We were young, so let's say third grade probably still. And we went to the elementary school, and there were some other kids there with their bikes, and they were doing tricks. And, you know, you got the parking lot of the school, and then you've got like the curb that runs alongside the school, you know, and that's where the cars would pull up to and park. These kids were riding up to that curb, and then they were, you know, pulling up on their handlebars, transferring their weight to the back and popping a wheelie, so they could then mount that curb and go over it. Because it's a shortcut. You don't have to find where the curb is, you know, cut down, where the actual people, you know, where they want you to like walk up to. And I can remember, I can remember seeing them doing that, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I want to do that, so I try it. I don't get the bike up high enough. The tire hits the curb. I crash, go over the handlebars, and it blows out my front tire. So now we got to walk back home, and my babysitter was like, okay, now you need to hold that bike up in the air. You can't let the weight of that bike on the tire. We can't just wheel it home that way. Like, we need to get it home, and you need to keep the weight off that front tire. And that was the longest walk home, because here I am trying to hold this bike up, and then eventually she was trying to do it, and then her arms got tired, and so we're switching back and forth. Oh my God, we couldn't get home fast enough. And we end up getting, we just the tube just blew out. So we ended up getting a new tube and fixing it. And I got a couple flats. I got a couple flat tires. One time when we were on those trails at a park, I ended up getting this super sharp piece of like branch. The thing was really sharp, and it had punctured in through the tire and hit the tube and flattened it. I can remember Dad repairing my bike one time. We did it under the tree out in the campground and got it all fixed up, because it was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? I don't have a bike anymore. And he's like, oh, no big deal. We'll just go into town and get a tube. And we did that, and we fixed it right there. And pretty soon I was back out running around all over the place. So I learned how to ride my bike, and then my brother got a bike too. And I don't remember when he got his bike. I don't know. He got a Huffy. I know that. Like, his was way newer. Like, his bike had the handbrakes for the front and rear. Mine did not. You would push backwards on the pedals to slow down. And it seemed like a lot of the kids my age, they almost all had the handbrake bikes. Like, my bike was so old that a lot of the kids didn't have it, where you had to push backwards on the pedals. And when those things would spin around and hit me in the shin, holy cow, did that hurt. Oh my God. You know, because the end of those platforms, those pedals, they had like little notches in them to give you traction. And they weren't sharp, but those things would come around and hit me in the shin. I was like, oh. And it only happened a couple times, but oh my God, that hurt. One of the times, I did wreck out a couple times on my bike. So I mentioned how I kept the kick bar tied up. A couple times, the shoelaces from my shoes, one of the loops got itself around the kickstand. Did I just call that thing a kick bar, kickstand? And so when I would go to push back on the pedals, I couldn't. I left my house one day and there was a car coming. It was a silver Ford Crown Victoria. It was an 80s model. It was more back when they were more boxy. And I couldn't stop. And I didn't want to wipe out like in the street, so I kept going. So I just steered my bike so I would go straight across the street. That guy, old guy, he blared on his horn. I'm assuming he slowed down. I don't really know, but it was frickin' close. And I rode out in front of him, and I had to ride right across the street, and I nailed that curb, smashed into it, flew over my handlebars into my friend's yard. And that happened a couple times. It wasn't necessarily because I tied the kickstand up, but for whatever reason, the shoelace, the loop would get caught around that kickstand, and I couldn't stop. But that was the only time that it almost like killed me. But anyways, about crashing, so I was mentioning, so my brother got a bike, and my mom and stepdad, they also got bikes. They ordered bikes from somewhere, they got shipped in boxes, and I can remember us assembling them in the garage, and they both got like 10 speeds. Because the whole thing was, we're gonna ride bikes as a family, which didn't really happen. But the one time that I do remember it happening, we all rode out to the elementary school again. And, you know, I'm mounting the curb, just, you know, doing that whole thing, because that's what I do. And my stepdad tried to do it, and he couldn't pop a wheelie high enough and ended up, you know, biffing and going over the handlebars just like I did. And I'm like, oh my God. His front tire didn't blow out though, so that was good. One bike ride that I remember was, so The Simpsons was becoming popular, and I really wanted to watch it. And Mom and Steve really weren't so sure if it was a show that I should be watching. So we asked them about it, and they're like, well, we'll see. Well, my mom and my brother and I, we ended up going on a bike ride over to the school, and unbeknownst to us, my stepdad was at home and he was watching the show because he wanted to see what it was like. So we end up going to the school, we're riding bikes, we come back home and the show's still on. So I don't know when we exactly left, but the show's still on, and we walk inside and I'm like, hey, you're watching The Simpsons. And I put two and two together, and they're like, yeah, this show seems fine. We just wanted to check it out first. So it was a whole ploy to get us out of the house. My town, small town, it actually had a BMX track. Now, maybe that's how big BMX was, that Even small towns had BMX tracks. I don't ever remember there being races there. I mean, I was young. I wasn't like watching the news or reading the newspaper, so maybe they had some sort of, event schedule or something, or they had a racing league out there. But we actually had a BMX bike track, and it was on the side of town that I never went on. And I think I just like accidentally discovered it. And I can remember the one time that we went there, it was spring. And the ground was still pretty wet from all the snow melt. It didn't seem that bad, but we went out to ride on the track and it looked fine, but it wasn't. We started sinking in mud. It was a huge mess and it didn't last very long. We ended up having to leave and throw our bikes in the back of the Suburban and bringing them home, but it was Chris and I. Chris must have spent the night or something. Because we both had our bikes. He had his bike too. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we picked this bike up. I don't know, but anyways, that place doesn't even exist anymore. That was kind of like an edge of town thing too, and now that area's been all completely redeveloped, and that BMX track is now a children's playground. But it was a neat track, except like you started off, they had all the lanes set up, and then when you started off, there was this big hill. Like I could barely get my bike up the hill. It went up, and then it kind of went like that, and it went up again and came down, but it was steep. They wanted the racers to get up there, but then they had a nice hill to go down so they could get some speed, and you could go through the whoops and all this stuff. And I do remember riding it once when it wasn't all completely muddy. And getting past that hill, I think I might have actually just walked over or walked my bike up to the top of it and then rode down because I just wasn't strong enough to pedal up there. But yeah, we must only did that twice because there was that one time that I remember when it was dry and then the time where it was super muddy. But so anyways, we're talking about bicycles. And BMX is huge. Oh, the movie Rad. It's the only BMX movie that I remember watching, but I can remember some kid was talking about that. Like we went to after school daycare for a while and Steve picked me up and I was like, hey, I want to see this movie. It's called Rad. It's about BMX biking. I haven't seen it since then. I'm sure that it is not good, but but I mean, they even had BMX bike movies, but that was the only one that I saw. It was called Rad. So anyways, this is something that I really wanted to talk about. Like riding a bike was huge for me as a kid. It was a whole new experience. Like I said, it increased the range that I could travel. I could see more of my town. It gave me freedom and independence. And I really, really loved doing it. And now that I think about it, I really like driving. I don't necessarily like traffic, but I like driving vehicles. I don't care what kind of vehicle it is. It could be a lawnmower, a sports car, a truck, like whatever it is. Like if I have something I've never got to driven before and someone's going to offer me the chance to drive it, heck yeah. It could be one of those gigantic dump trucks they have like in quarries that are just absolutely massive. If I got the chance to drive one of those things, hell yeah, I'm going to take it. So this might have been the start of that because when I started driving, I love to go on drives. I would just go out and drive around town. You roll the windows down, turn the radio up just a little bit. Loved it. Still to this day. And it was kind of the same thing with the bike. I'd get on the bike and I would just ride around. Just look at the neighborhoods, look at the houses, just ride around. So I guess that was kind of the start of that. But I keep going off topic here. So I want to talk about bikes. I want to talk about BMX stuff because that was popular in the 80s. And there is one like bike game that I played as a kid that was kind of my first. I guess it was like my first game that had a bike in it, and it was a pretty popular one. I'm sure a lot of you played it. That game is Paperboy. So I thought it'd be fun to play some Paperboy today, and we can ride our bike, and we can deliver the newspaper, or we can break a whole bunch of windows. But I never got to play this in the arcade. I actually didn't even know that this was an arcade game that had a full setup with the handlebars and everything. You know, never knew. Going to the arcade was like a really big treat. It was something that we just did not do. So this was the first time that I actually experienced this game, was playing on the Nintendo. And I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite NES games, but it's definitely memorable. I really enjoyed it and found it quite fun. So anyways, yeah, let's go play some Paperboy. All right, we're playing Paperboy. These are all to soon be our future non-customers. Everybody's favorite day of the week, Monday. So, ooh, that was close. Being a paperboy is one thing that I actually never did. My wife actually delivered papers when she was, I think, a teenager in high school. She had like 3 jobs at one point, and delivering papers was one of them. But the thing about this game is you just need to, whoops. Oh crap. I'm already out of papers? Alright. You just need to, whether you're going as fast as you can or as slow as you can, you just gotta, you know, it's all about the angles and that, so you just gotta make sure you position your bike in the same spot, and then you'll know when to throw, which, I've got this house down. Well, that looked like it was a front step and not the mailbox, but if I'm going full speed, basically, I just throw it when I get close to the edge of the driveway there, like their address sign. Oh man, I am not doing good. There we go. It's about the only house I can deliver to right. And at the end of every single day, you get to go to the BMX track. It's right down the street. So I forgot to mention this in the other part of the video, but by my house, there wasn't, like, some undeveloped lots. Like, when they built the houses, the street just dead-ended. And then at some point they finished the street, but they hadn't built any houses on the property yet. So it was kind of weird because you had all these houses like were built in the 50s and 60s. And then you had like 6 houses that were built in the 90s. But before they built those houses, we would ride down to that empty lot, and it always seemed like there was some trash in the lot. And the one time we went down there, there was a tire, a cinder block, and a sheet of plywood. So of course we made a jump so we could jump our bikes over it. And when I go to do my jump, I crash and I wipe out, and I kind of knew it was coming. Like, I went off the jump pretty fast, and I'm like, oh man, oh dang it. And so I ended up crashing onto this weed. I don't know what kind of weed it was, but like it was a large broadleaf type weed, and had all these spiky things on the leaves. And of course, all the places that I could have landed, that's where I landed. It was right on that weed. The day we did that, we did it with, gosh dang it, that happened again the last time I went there. That lawnmower or whatever it was blocked my shot. The day that we did that was with this neighbor kid that lived right next door. His name was Aaron. He was, I don't know, like a year. He might have been like 2 years older than me. Older than me enough that I kind of like looked up to him, you know. And he was the one that, we were there that day, and we all had our bikes, and so we set all that junk up and made a ramp out of it. But yeah, I don't know, like he was nice, and then all of a sudden he just turned into a real unpleasant person to be around. And his buddies would come over and they'd bully myself and my brother. Like, we'd be playing out in the front yard and they'd come out and start harassing us and whatnot. And I don't know what happened with that guy. He just, like, there was one night we were at dinner and he was arguing with his friend and their fist fight spilled over into our front yard. So we're sitting there at the dinner table eating our dinner, you know, and there's like these two windows right on the wall right there, and all of a sudden there we could hear the yelling and whatnot, but all of a sudden there they are in our front yard and they're throwing fists. And it was, oh god, it was October because we had dang, you could buy those garbage bags that were orange and had like a jack-o'-lantern look to them, and then you could fill them up with all your yard leaves. They ended up falling on one of those and like blew the side of it out. And after that happened, like, Aaron kind of changed, but yeah, I don't know. I'm getting totally off subject here with this. But anyways, whenever I think about riding bikes and stuff, I always think about this game. Like, this was the first game that I played where you primarily rode a bike. The other one that I played at Chris's house was California Games. I was bad at that game. I always played the BMX track part of it. That was my favorite part. But this isn't a game that any of my friends had. We must have rented it? I don't really remember, but I do remember the first time I played this game, it was on the NES. And I was all like, oh cool, you get to ride a bike and deliver newspapers. Oh, the screen's kind of jittery. Maybe a CRT hid this better, but it seems like when I adjust speed, or sometimes when I'm at full speed, like, it's like the frame rate drops off and the screen gets all jittery. Hopefully that doesn't transfer over in the recording too much. Did I even make a paper? Oh, all right. A perfect delivery of 2 houses, and I got a resubscriber. As the week goes on, if I remember right, there's more and more hazards that I have to avoid. Oops. I thought that house was weird, the tombstones in the front yard. Like, what house would have tombstones in the front yard? And wouldn't that be the house that the Grim Reaper should be coming out of? I mean, that's a pretty morbid thing to have in your front yard. Unless it's Halloween. That's a new house. So I don't know if the points are the same if you throw a newspaper on the front step. I would assume that you get more points for putting it in the mailbox than the front step, but they both count as delivered papers. If I remember, I don't think this was in the arcade. I mentioned that I'd never played the arcade as a kid, but I don't think this was in the arcade, if memory serves me right. This maybe was just something they did for the NES. I don't know, it's kind of this fun little thing. You know, you get done delivering your papers and you get to ride through a BMX track, and seeing as when this game came out and how popular BMX was in the 80s, I mean, it's really kind of a no-brainer to throw that in there as a little bonus. All right, I'm slowly gaining subscribers back. Maybe I can finish the week out. Oops. The one thing I'll say about this game is maybe it's just because of the Oh, dang. Maybe it's just because of the isometric type of view, but a lot of times I feel like the collision detection is off. Like, I think that I will be able to avoid that skateboard guy. You know, so I'll try to go around an obstacle and then I end up hitting it anyways. But maybe that's just because of the awkward view. Dang. Like sometimes when that kid comes down, I'll have to go in between him and like a fence or that light that is on the like the brick. I'm running out of papers. Oh boy. Dang it. Oh crap. Ugh. Well, I did horrible there. I only need to get one delivery to get my perfect delivery for the day. Oops. The other thing that sometimes happens too is like sometimes you'll get trapped in the street, that little grading thing that's right there, like the curb. You can't go over that, so you'll get trapped in the street. And there was one time that I thought it like respawned me in and I got stuck out in the street and a car hit me. And I'm just like, really? I mean, I got so cheated out of one of my lives. Oh. Dang it. Last guy. So I always try to get off the street as soon as possible. If only those were subscribers. Alright, well, I got my one. Oh, good. Mrs. Johnson on the corner there. She resubscribed. That's nice. Let's see if I can get her paper. Oops. Well, so much for that. Oh man, hazards are galore. Get that guy in the crotch. I like the sound when you put on the brakes. It's like you're hitting the skids in a car. It's like this place I used to work at was on a really like main road in my town, and it was by a intersection, and there wasn't a lot of accidents there, but accidents happen, and you know, I'd just be working doing my thing, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's another one. All right. Oh, I thought I was going to crash. I mean, she still got her paper. It just cost her the cost of replacing the window. Oh, well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Not a lot of depth to this game, but it's still enjoyable, fun game, and it ties into the, you know, the whole biking and somewhat the BMX stuff. When I think of this game, I think back of riding my bike as a kid and being really excited the first time I played this. This was a cool game. So Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you guys next time.